Shooting fans, stay tuned for black powder cartridge competition at Whittington and the national championship in the sport of shooting iron. Plus, a look at the rifles and the 1,000-yard shots in the Creedmore tradition. And Byron's trying aerial shots on a very noisy duck. It's all today here on American Shooter.
American Shooter is brought to you by Smith & Wesson, the world's largest manufacturer of handguns for sporting, law enforcement, and military use since 1852. And by Federal Ammunition, Federal Knockdown Power.
Welcome to this edition of American Shooter. I'm Jim Scatton, and this is a reproduction of the famous Sharps rifle as it evolved in the 1860s to use the newly invented self-contained cartridge. The Sharps is famous as the buffalo gun of the prairies. 140 years later, the buffalo guns are thundering again on the high plains of New Mexico for the national championship of NRA black powder cartridge silhouette. The wildlife roaming the Whittington Center has nothing to fear from competitors on this firing line, unless those animals are made of black steel.
I shot rams, first bank, first match, and I hit the first one, and at that point I was a goner.
It's a challenge. It's not that it goes boom and it bang, it really is just trying to get that metal object to fall over and get your point.
The objects Tina is trying to knock over are the chickens at 200 meters, pigs at 300 meters, turkeys lined up at 385 meters, and the rams all the way out at 500 meters. There are more than 300 shooters here, and over 4 days, each one will have 120 chances to knock down the silhouettes for a possible score of 120 points. Each time they come to the firing line, they'll have 2.5 minutes to shoot each bank of 5 targets. Easy enough to explain, but it takes 2 people to play this game.
The only thing I can liken it to is golf, in that you have an object to get another object to a destination through the weather. And in golf you have a caddy to help you do that. In the shooting you have a spotter to help you do that.
Ron Long is spotting for 3-time national champion Steve Garvey, using the scope to watch the heat rising downrange.
I'm reading a mirage to see which direction the wind's going, looking at the wind flags, telling him if I think he should hold right or left or center or high or low, just giving him my gut feel for what the conditions are.
Dale Burson is reading the mirage for 12-year-old son Ross, who's picked up a valuable lesson while learning the silhouette game.
That when you don't do something right, that you can't think about that way you shoot the next one, or it'll occur again. So you have to pay attention to what you're fixing to do, not what you did.
Jeff Smith's not thinking about the past, confined to a wheelchair from a motorcycle accident. He's found his biggest challenge isn't his disability, but the chickens.
Rail shot again.
They call them foul for a good reason, because they're not fair. 3/4 of the match is shot either sitting or prone. Well, I can fling myself onto the ground easy. Gravity always gets me there, and at that point I have no handicap.
Competitors are allowed to use cross sticks to steady their aim while shooting prone, but those pesky chickens must be shot offhand. The rules also say rifles must have an external hammer and be made prior to 1896, or be an accurate reproduction. Once you've acquired your gun from a dealer, you'll then need a vernier tang rear sight, a necessity in this match. These sights can cost as much as $500. They're adjustable in half-minute increments for both windage and elevation. And most shooters add a front globe sight that is also windage adjustable. Some have a spirit level to prevent canting the gun. But there's also a class for vintage-style scopes allowed for shooters with poor eyesight. Dwayne Jenner's reproduction Parsons scope gives him a 6-power view of the animals.
I know there's quite a few elderly gentlemen came up and talked to me about it and says Father Time has taken its toll and they can't see the iron sights. So I firmly believe if you can't see it, you can't hit it.
Father Time has also made the period outfits of some shooters unique. Mike Callahan's with the Oklahoma Museum of Natural History, so he's dressed and armed like the 1870s field crew of paleontologists off Neil Charles Marsh, a group that could have used shooting tips.
Well, they found out once they got into the field, armed to the teeth that they were, that they couldn't hit anything that they pointed the rifles at. So they had to rely on the Army Scouts and the Army Troopers to bring them their camp meat.
But as a modern dinosaur historian, Mike is a lot better shot, finishing 12th in the AAA division. In the master class, Steve Garvey is leading the pack, finishing with a score of 93 out of a possible 120. Only Brian Chilson has a chance to keep Steve from taking his 4th title, but his rifle breaks on a practice shot. Like a NASCAR pit crew, Brian's friends pitch in to fix the rifle, and in minutes he's back on the line where he has to drop all 5 turkeys to win. But leaving 1 turkey standing, Brian didn't even realize he's tied the leader, Steve Garvey, forcing a shoot-off.
You have Come on in. That's great.
I don't like to keep score because you start keeping score and you start losing quick.
Well, if that's the magic, I'm not keeping score ever again. But we will be scoring the shoot-off when we return. And taking a close look at the guns, the well-known Sharps, and Steve Garvey's Ballard. That's next.
For more on American Shooter, check us out online at americanshooter.com.
Most folks tend to think there were only Sharps rifles, harvesting buffalo on the western plains and coining sayings like being a sharpshooter. Well, in fact, there were a good many more. High walls, rolling blocks, even the trap door converted after the war. So it's appropriate that this year's championship comes down to a final shoot-off between competitors and competing rifles. Shooting fans, stay tuned for black powder cartridge competition at Whittington and the national championship in the sport of shooting iron. Plus a look at the rifles and the 1,000-yard shots in the Creedmore tradition. And Byron's trying aerial shots on a very noisy duck. It's all today here on American Shooter.
American Shooter is brought to you by Smith & Wesson, the world's largest manufacturer of handguns for sporting, law enforcement, and military use since 1852. And by Federal Ammunition, Federal Knockdown Power.
Welcome to this edition of American Shooter. I'm Jim Scatton, and this is a reproduction of the famous Sharps rifle as it evolved in the 1860s to use the newly invented self-contained cartridge. The Sharps is famous as the buffalo gun of the prairies. 140 years later, the buffalo guns are thundering again on the high plains of New Mexico for the national championship of NRA black powder cartridge silhouette. The wildlife roaming the Whittington Center has nothing to fear from competitors on this firing line, unless those animals are made of black steel. Shooting fans, stay tuned for black powder cartridge competition at Whittington and the national championship in the sport of shooting iron. Plus, a look at the rifles and the 1,000-yard shots in the Creedmore tradition. And Byron's trying aerial shots on a very noisy duck. It's all today here on American Shooter.
American Shooter is brought to you by Smith & Wesson, the world's largest manufacturer of handguns for sporting, law enforcement, and military use since 1852. And by Federal Ammunition. Federal knockdown power.
Welcome to this edition of American Shooter. I'm Jim Scatton, and this is a reproduction of the famous Sharps rifle as it evolved in the 1860s to use the newly invented self-contained cartridge. The Sharps is famous as the buffalo gun of the prairies. 140 years later, the buffalo guns are thundering again on the high plains of New Mexico for the national championship of NRA black powder cartridge silhouette. The wildlife roaming the Whittington Center has nothing to fear from competitors on this firing line, unless those animals are made of black steel.
I shot rams, first bank, first match, and I hit the first one. And at that point, I was a goner.
It's a challenge. It's not that it goes boom and it bang. It really is just trying to get that metal object to fall over and get your point.
The objects Tina is trying to knock over are the chickens at 200 meters, pigs at 300 meters, turkeys lined up at 385 meters, and the rams all the way out at 500 meters. There are more than 300 shooters here, and over 4 days, each one will have 120 chances to knock down the silhouettes for a possible score of 120 points. Each time they come to the firing line, they'll have 2.5 minutes to shoot each bank of 5 targets. Easy enough to explain, but it takes 2 people to play this game.
The only thing I can liken it to is golf, in that you have an object to get another object to a destination through the weather. And
Guns. Brought to you by Ruger, arms makers for responsible sportsmen.
The history of this match begins in Creedmore on New York's Long Island in 1873, when the newly formed NRA built its first 1,000-yard range. U.S. and international teams competed at 800, 900, and 1,000 yards, but the shooter could only use his body to support the rifle. This odd yet stable position took on the name of the range, Creedmore. The tradition lives on today, but now half a continent away at the NRA's Whittington Center in New Mexico. Another change is the use of cross sticks that has all been eliminated shooting from the Creedmore position. Harry Lewis and Buddy Visser are sharpshooters with Tulsa's SWAT team.
There's a lot more finesse with these compared to the more modern guns, which gives it more of a challenge, and that's what we were looking for, was a challenge, and we found a challenge.
The match consists of 10 rounds from each distance for a total of 30. A shot in the X ring counts 10 points, and an X. Rings 10 through 7 count as many points, and a hit outside the rings is worth 6. When the target pops up, the spotter can read the score and then read the wind downrange for the shooter. But even with good spotting, getting the bullet on target takes more than good aim. It takes power, and the preferred Creedmore round is the 45-90.
It has considerably better range than a 45-70, but you don't have the problem with fouling in the longer cases when you get up into the 45, 110, 120.
Typically, reproduction rolling blocks and sharps are the choice here, as they were in the 1870s. But John Flanagan's shooting an original 1880 trapdoor Springfield. John's competed with this rifle for more than 20 years and only recently had to replace the barrel.
The original of this type, the 1880 long range, had a 6-groove, 1 and 18 twist barrel, and that's exactly what we have. The dimensions of this barrel were copied from the original.
And now with the new barrel, John's planning on a lot more shooting.
It's got a long ways to go yet. I got a 2.5-year-old great-grandson that'll probably be shooting this.
And with the long history of this event, John's great-grandson may pass the old trapdoor on to his great-grandson one day to compete in the match known as the Creedmore.
American Shooter presents Gun Tech, the latest in guns and shooting gear.
Well, here's the answer. If finding time to get out to the range is a problem, get yourself a .22 caliber bullet trap and do your shooting in the basement. If you want to, you can even practice in the dark if you've got a set of laser grips on your .22. The bullet trap comes from Outers. It's welded steel plate with a target clip, and it'll stop all .22s, but only if you hit the trap. So be careful with this. Be sure of your backstop. The Outers bullet trap's about $75. Now here's the new line of laser grips from Crimson Trace. Obviously they got them for the Ruger 22. These are the new full wrap grip set for the SIG 229. They have the laser mounted high in the right grip and mercury batteries and momentary power switch in the left grip. And once sighted in, you can forget about the standard sights and just follow the dot at night or in full sunlight. This is a great edge in carry gun sighting, whether on the SIG or for Smith or Taurus small frame revolvers. Laser grips are about $280 depending on the model from Crimson Trace. Now take a look at the new Colt Defender XS, just about the smallest and lightest full power carry gun you can find. It is of course a classic 1911 single action design chambered in .45 ACP, but with all the enhancements: extended beaver tail safety, commander hammer, 3-dot snag free sights, and it's built on an aluminum alloy receiver. So it's small and lightweight as well, just 22 ounces to have 7 rounds of .45 at the ready. This is lightweight, major power in a carry gun if you like a 1911 style action. And with all the competition enhancements included on a factory gun, the Colt Defender XS is something of a deal at a suggested retail of $840. And that's Gun Tech. And next, Byron's drawing a bead on a fast mover.
Shooting fans, call now for your officially licensed American Shooter range shirt. These comfortable but rugged khaki shirts are 100% pre-washed cotton, perfect for the shooting range or anywhere, with big cargo pockets, a double-deck utility pocket, and embroidered show logo. The American Shooter range shirt is available for only $39.95 plus shipping and handling. Order now and we'll include our Best of American Shooter video, a $20 value, absolutely free. American Shooter is brought to you by Colt. If it isn't a Colt, it's just a copy. And by Outers, gun cleaning kits, chemicals, traps, and shooting accessories.
Over the years, you've seen Byron Ferguson working out his leads on all kinds of aerial targets, but never one quite like today's event. Byron's brought in some high-quality help to give him some fast-moving targets.
Well, you've seen us do that before, have somebody throwing far simulating bird shots. You ain't gonna believe what we're gonna do today. We're gonna go, I guess, what you could call high-tech.
Byron's right, and if you want to simulate birds on the wing, you can't get any more realistic than this. And since Byron is pulling the bowstring, he's got to have a pilot.
I'll tell you right now, guys, in order to do this kind of shooting, it helps to have a friend like Sidney Austin.
Sidney's got 2 things going for him today. He's a 2-time National Remote Control Pilot Champion. And he's got Byron shooting, which means his plane won't likely take any friendly fire. It would hope.
Well, my major concern is not shooting the tail off of Sidney's plane, because that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like in order to hit the balloon, you're going to have to shoot right at the airplane. That's how much lead you have.
Now that Byron has the lead figured out on that one, Sidney brings the plane up with a new balloon and a new flight plan.
This is going to be fun.
The difficulty here is that the balloon appears to be much closer to the tail of the plane, making the shot a bit unnerving to say the least. Byron now has to aim in front of the plane in order to hit the target.
That's just like the real thing, yeah.
All right, one more takeoff and one more pass, this time low and fast.
All that lead change is quick.
The problems with the low-flying pass are Byron's having to allow the plane to fly by before he's able to shoot the balloon. And the speed of the plane is deceptive as it approaches, making the lead almost impossible to judge.
It seemed to be almost floating as it was coming in, and then it would get beside me, it's like it just accelerated, like it had rockets or something. It just screamed when it went by me.
Gotcha!
No surprise there, Byron. Now, here's what's coming for next week. It's the World Speed Shooting Championship for 1999, the shooting version of drag racing, the Steel Challenge. Plus, the British muzzleloader from the Civil War that gave Confederate snipers deadly accuracy. And Bob Munden is planning on scrambled eggs at 100 yards. For American Shooter, I'm Jim Scatton. I'll see you then. In the meantime, shoot safely and keep them in the 10 range.
For a VHS copy of today's show, call 1-800-981-7859. Show videos are just $9.95 plus shipping and handling. American Shooter is an RTM production.